General Johnson Keyama stoking once more the conversation on the need to push for more transparency in Ghana's asset declaration regime. The reason for which we're seeing part of the discourse now shifting towards making it possible for public officers to openly declare their assets. Well, earlier today, the president himself, as you see in the picture there, formally submitting in line with Article 286 his assets, which is now declaring in line with the Constitution to the Auditor General. But that man, as you see in the picture here, has a concern about a possible review and making the regime more transparent. Take a look at this. He's calling for a very important issue. It's got to do with the review of the Constitution. And his point is that, quote, if you submit your assets, you should be able to publish it freely when you're, first of all, leaving office. They should also be able to make, to see whether the changes have happened ever since you started, taking up public office. And it's all part of the broad plan feeding into the whole conversation about making the regime more transparent and making some changes in terms of the fight against corruption. Let's get into it because it's very important. This is the current regime that we have, basically asking you, per Article 286 of the Constitution, for you to declare your assets. But interestingly, what happens is that it's sealed, first of all, so nobody knows what's in there, whether or not it's factual. It cannot be open until you are subject to an investigation. And that's where the challenge is for many, because if you have a sealed document being submitted to an Auditor General who's not even in the position, first of all, to either ascertain or verify what's contained in the document, then of course this Constitution and its provisions on the asset declaration regime ought to be reformed. That's the argument on the part of those who side with the view that, well, there's a need for a reform of that constitutional provision in Article 286. But take a look at this. There's an opening in the law if you still want to check and perhaps you have doubts, and that's because some of the public officers may be subject to public investigations or maybe standing trial in court. If that situation arises out of Article 286, you have the opportunity then to verify what's contained, first of all, in what it is that the public officer has submitted, and possibly making some inferences based on what the investigative processes will tell us. But until then, no one is able to know what the president, the vice president, members of parliament, ministers, deputies, even the Chief Justice herself and other justices of the Supreme Court were not able to tell right now what their assets are, what their interests are, because all they've declared will remain sealed until investigations are taking place. And that also applies to the likes of ambassadors, high commissioners. Take a look at this. Even CEOs who've been recently appointed for taking charge over the state-owned enterprises. And that's why the president today, after declaring his assets, is giving that order that all of you have to follow. Make sure you meet the deadline by March 31st, or you risk losing your job. But is that enough? That's the question, because clearly, if you're taking a look at what the provisions are within 286, you are basically being asked by the Constitution to, first of all, provide that document before assuming office. There's a window of about 3 months upon coming into office. And you could also do it at the end of every 4 years, because technically, if you're a member of parliament, you have, an election that you've won. Obviously, you'd have to be subject to the process again. But if you have yourself being an appointee, say a CEO or one of the MDs running the state-owned enterprises, then what you need to do is to declare either upon coming into office, before assuming office, or 3 months is the deadline per the constitutional provision. Then we talk about the 4-year period. And then if you're leaving office as well, there's that opening for us to do that in terms of the arguments that people are making. Take a look at this. This is a push that's been coming through because for some, if you really want to make the asset declaration regime more transparent, then we should have a more frequent re-declaration because over the years, if you're an MP and you stand office for a period of 4 years, in the next 4, we should have the ability for you to redeclare, which is already provided for. However, in the period of your 4-year tenure, there could be a periodic frequent redeclaration for us to be sure that everything in there is indeed intact. And of course, subject to some sort of verification. That has been the argument being put forward. Take a look at this. The issue about accessibility to what's been declared. You saw the picture on the screens earlier about the president submitting his document to the Auditor General, but no one knows what's in there. And that will be the case for many other public officers who are declaring their assets. So how about a more transparent regime, making it more accessible, so we know what your interests are, so we know what your, of course, assets are publicly. But there's a bigger conversation around legislative provision. Many asking for instance, the Public Officers Bill, which they believe will provide a better remit aside the constitutional provision for us to have a more defined approach and processes leading to how you can first of all declare and when and how frequent you should be in terms of declaring your assets. So all of these have been summarized into that broad conversation which is also featuring very keenly in the Constitutional Review Committee's report. They also side with the view that, well, if you're talking about an asset declaration regime, let it be a bit more transparent. So first of all, they are making the point that the man who's receiving the assets from declaration forms from the president today should have the power as well to first of all check and verify, because nobody knows what's in there. A reason for which the recommendation is coming through that let's try as much as possible to give a bit more powers to the Auditor General, so he is first of all able to verify, because no one knows what's in there. Then the point about certifying the verification, because obviously if he's able to check, then he's able to flag you as having passed or otherwise. And that's why we're summing all of that up, finding out from those who matter and those who've occupied office as to whether or not the whole push for, transparency in the asset declaration regime should be reformed. What do you think about this as well? Be my guest as we explore all of this here on PM Express with me, Blessed Sugan. Don't forget that we're proudly supported by Syntex Tank. It is tough, it is strong, Pepsodent Cavity Fighter, and the Academic Times Journal. When we get back, we get to hear from one man who's been leading that charge. He's the former Auditor General, and some other MPs and the Ghana Integrity Initiative will also be stating its position on the matter. Stay with us. We'll be back. And thanks for staying with us on PM Express. I am Blessed Sugan. The question obviously is our asset declaration regime as transparent as it should be? The reason for which we've pointed out to you some of the lapses in the system and the recommendations coming through from the Constitutional Review Commission and its reports. But how do we enforce that? And perhaps if it ought to change, what needs to be done? We'll get to that shortly, but just a reminder, we're supported by Syntex Tank. It is strong, it is tough, Academic Times Journal, and also the Pepsodent Cavity Fighter. And don't forget to always be on the lookout for these products. But Ghana, we need to talk about this. Obviously, if you're looking for that secret in terms of real water storage, then Syntex Tank should be your option. Of course, the tank is having that logo of a tortoise on it. And then it's not just any kind of a tank, it's a correct one. That's right, I'm talking about the Syntex Tank, the one with the logo of a tortoise. So be on the lookout for that. It is tough, it is strong, and that's what you always opt to choose in terms of your water storage. Pepsodent Cavity Fighter is also on board with us, because anytime we eat, those small little particles are trapped in between our teeth. So night and day, of course, that ought to be your option as well in terms of your toothpaste. Choose the Pepsodent Cavity Fighter, and of course you will be on track in terms of helping your dentition. But how about telling you about the Academic Times Journal as well? They have the High G and Level G coming up shortly. They are obviously producing content in terms of academic research and finding that will impact society. So look out for the Tertiary G, which will be for tertiary students, helping them to impact society through research and to prepare young minds for their future. So this is the time for you to opt for the subscription to the Academic Times Journal, and we will be putting out more information so you can reach out to them. But in the meantime, you can always reach out to them. It's at academictimes.com, and you will get much more details. Or you can equally send them an email, info@theacademictimes.com, or you can equally call them 050 8034. And you would be reaching out to Academic Times as well. Tonight, my guests helping us to break down the issues and look at the possibly the reforms that we're opting or perhaps projecting for in the constitutional review process. I have Daniel Yao Domelevo, who is the former Auditor General, joining us here on PM Express. We have Mary Awolana Ada, who's the Executive Director for the Ghana Integrity Initiative, and Ras Mubarak is former MP for Kumbungu. Thank you all for joining us. And gentlemen, I see your faces on the screen, so it means we're set for the conversation. Let me start off with you, Daniel Yao Domelevo, because the pictures we've seen today of John Mahama submitting that brown envelope obviously suggests that the president has declared his assets. But you've been leading this charge, asking for more transparency. How so?
Yeah, thank you, and good evening to you and your viewers as well as listeners. Well, it is good to see that the president has declared his assets. I was not too happy seeing the envelope being given to the Auditor General, because that goes more or less to support what people have all along been saying, that you put your declaration in an envelope, seal it, and give it to the Auditor General, which is not the case anyway. You should have gone through the entire process so that they capture it, because you are supposed to verify the signature and be sure that the form has been properly completed. That at least should have been done, but it was not done. But it's a good gesture or good sign that the president has declared. And the most important thing is that he has given a deadline to his appointees and other public office holders to also declare their assets and liabilities. But to be honest with you, I think 31st of March is too far away, because the Constitution provides that it should be declared before you take office. So you should not be able to give somebody 31st of March. Some will argue that at 550 allows 6 months, but at 550 is at variance or contradicts the Constitution. And I have a letter in my possession, which was written by the former Attorney General, Gloria Kufu, confirming that the provisions of the provisions of subsection 4.1 of the Act 550 contradicts the Constitution. However, we have all been upholding and following that. I'm also happy the president says those who don't declare, is going to give them a punish or ask them to leave office. I think that should cut across everybody, and I think that will be good. Except that I would like to say this declaration is good. We must add to it lifestyle audit and the reversal of burden of proof. If we don't do these two things so that we can audit and find out how did you get this money, and we don't do that, people are going to hide their resources or their assets with their families and friends. So everybody who is suspected of being an ally of a political or public office holder must be subjected to lifestyle audit. And once you can prove that the resources at your disposal are far more than your sources of income, then you must prove to the state. Otherwise, these resources should be taken away from you. UK, United Kingdom has done it. Several countries, the latest to do it about a month ago is Ethiopia. In fact, even Ethiopia backdated this 10 years to ensure that people can be held accountable. So I think the legal framework leaves a lot to be desired, and we must do that. If the president is mindful of doing that, he should quickly pass the Code of Conduct for Public Office Holders and put in all these amendments. He mentioned public declaration, so he should put it inside the law so that we go. And I think it will be a big plus for him.
For you, the proponents of reforming the asset declaration regime, is it the case that you're always suspicious of the political class or the Article 71 office holders? They are public officials, leading ones, of course. You would expect that they'll do right at all time, isn't it?
We are not suspicious of them. They have proven time and again that they have been stealing the public funds. That's the fact. The evidence abounds. Look at the Auditor General's report. You see that people holding public funds have been always misappropriating or using the money for their benefits. Put the Auditor General's report aside. Many of them have been in office just for 4 years, maximum 8 years. See how filthy rich they are. They are terribly rich. And if you look at their salaries, I used to see some of the MPs that ask Auditor General, my salary is bigger than yours, but you seem to be 10, 20, 100 times richer than me. How did you make it? So the truth on the ground, not suspicion, is that they have been stealing public funds. That is why we want to know how much you had before coming and how much you had on your exit. I'm not saying all of them, but there are some of them who clearly have been abusing their office.
And I'm interested in some of your interesting, encounter with the enforcement of the law in terms of the asset declaration regime. Obviously, you've had some interesting cases to deal with, isn't it?
Yes, I did. In fact, when we started, it was clear that even the judiciary, who we thought should be at the forefront of law enforcement, they didn't declare. In fact, including the former Chief Justice, Justice Eni Yabua, and the rest, several of them, judges of the High Court, Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, they were all not declaring. And when people complained or petitioned the Commission for Human Rights, I was completely disappointed when the Human Rights Commission just said that, well, there are no punishments prescribed in any law for them, or at 550 does not prescribe any punishment, so go and sin no more. I thought that if the Constitution said do something before you can enter office or you can assume office, and you didn't do that before coming to office, you are occupying the office unconstitutionally. For instance, could President Mahama just wake up on the 7th of January 2025 and say that I've been voted for as a president, so I'm going to start as a president? I don't want swearing in. No, it cannot happen. But how come that we judiciously comply with those requirements, even including swearing in of ministers, but then as a declaration which is supposed to be done by the same constitution asking for it, say do that before you assume the office, they don't do it. So I think we need to take it seriously. But like I said, if we declare the assets properly with punishment and publication, and we don't add lifestyle audit to ensure that people will be audited to see whether their sources of income are commensurate with the resources they have, and there is no reversal of the burden of proof, it is not going to help us. So we may have to bring all those ingredients in to ensure that asset declaration helps us in the fight against corruption.
Because I was going to ask you that what will it change if perhaps you've been appointed as an MD or a politician and into the political class, and then you declare your assets. If you do so, the public is just having or gaining knowledge about what you have. But how does that practically fight corruption?
Yes, what it does is that if it is done and done properly, what we are saying, where we put it in the public domain, it means everybody knows that before Daniel was appointed MD of this state enterprise, he has only one house. Then if he declares after the 4 years or when he's leaving office, and now he has 4 houses, then people can ask questions, how did you get the 3 houses? Because if you compare your salary to your cost of living or your expenditures, we don't see how you can save that money. Of course, it is possible that during the 4 years, you stick Lotto somewhere and won a huge amount of money. You declare it that I got it from Lotto. Or maybe you inherited a very rich family member, and so you do that, and I think that is fine.
Okay, Ras is with us because he's a former MP, and the point you made about the political class always plundering state funds will obviously not come at your pleasure, Ras. But tell us what you think about it. The fact that at least by reforming the asset declaration regime, your colleagues will not be able to take away the funds anymore, perhaps yourself, as you're being accused now.
Well, this is a very exciting conversation. First of all, good evening, and commendations to the former Auditor General for his spirited effort at fighting corruption. I think is quite commendable, and all of us should, attach the fight against corruption with that much zeal. We would be getting somewhere. Clearly, you saw President Mahama give a clear indication that he has zero tolerance for corruption, and that appointees in his administration, would have to adhere to the tenets of the Constitution, which is Article 286 of the Constitution. But it's not just appointees of the president, because there are members of parliament who are also governed by this, who may not be appointees who may not be appointees of the president. So we may have to expect a certain strong signal, even from constituents, the public, who send MPs there, that look, you are voted as lawmakers, we ought to see you to be adhering to the law. And if you are not adhering to the tenets of the Constitution, then probably you may not get a re-election, or probably the Speaker at this level may send a strong signal, for compliance in Parliament. And then also you have the judiciary. Concerning members of the judiciary are also covered by this. But it's not only the political class who have their who plunder public resources. A lot of the time they do this in cahoots with persons in the civil service. And we are expecting that once one attains a certain level, be it a politician or in the public service, they would clearly abide by, what is in the Constitution. Clearly, as the caveats that the former Auditor General gave, it's not every politician who is plundering states' resources. But I think this is one conversation we've had time and again, over and over. I've lost count the number of times, Joy News has had to, have a discussion on asset declaration.
And for you, what do you feel has been that major setback in just advancing the conversation? But because this should be a simple process to review, isn't it?
I mean, as a matter of fact, the Learned Attorney General can actually amend, Act 556, I think, that would give another layer to the Asset Declaration Act. But as far as the Constitution is concerned, obviously there has to be a constitutional, amendment. But there's a governing act which could also be amended to add a couple of things. For instance, if you're a public officer and you declare your assets, it's in a sealed envelope. It's never opened until there's an investigation or something comes up. And clearly, if I'm wearing my journalistic cap, I want to see what President Mahama has declared. I want to see what Speaker Bagbin has declared. I want to see what the CJ has declared. I want to see what every public office holder has declared, so that over a period of 4 years or 8 years or 12 years, if their assets do not match up with their earnings, then we can say, wait a minute, you came into office with 0 or X amount of assets. Today you've accumulated so much. Where did you get that from? And but the reality is that asset declaration alone would not do it, and that is why there are other building blocks to fighting corruption. And I want to agree with the Auditor General that we also need some law, that would ensure that there's a lifestyle audit, that would ensure that if even ordinary Ghanaians putting up buildings that do not match up with their, earnings, somebody should be able to say, wait a minute,
right,
you are a teacher here. We notice how much teachers earn or how much, nurses earn. All of a sudden, you didn't win lottery and you certainly didn't get an inheritance, but you've got A, B, or C assets. And it doesn't have to take, somebody in public office to blow the whistle, on some of these things.
Right, but have we paid attention to this? You in the political class, I mean, politically exposed persons are very vulnerable. I'm using that word advisedly because your assets could be subject to attack based on political transition. Say, after elections, I mean, given the trend of what we keep seeing election after election, is it helpful to have, the publication of the assets? What's your own thought on that?
We want open governance. We want transparency. We want a situation where, politicians and public office holders are not plundering the public kitty. And in so doing, it will be very important that, the envelopes are opened, the media is invited, and I'm looking forward to a day when probably some public officer holder will say, look, invite the media, even though it's not the law. And you can understand why public office holders are not opening it up. They are adhering to the law, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with, adhering to the law as it is. But it will be very remarkable. It will be very exciting or encouraging, to see one public office holder, open up their envelope and say, look, look into what I have, and 4 years down the line, you can invite the press again and say, this is what I have. If you have any questions, you could ask me. I think that should be one of the exciting ways to go. But I like the tone that the president has set, which is that, look, by the 31st of March, all of you who have been appointed would have had to declare your assets or risk losing your place in
the former Auditor General says that's too big a lifeline. Why 31st of March, actually, when you can just do that next week or say the next day?
Well, you can't fault the president because the Governance Act allows for assets to be declared within 6 months, even though the Constitution, which is a supreme law, requires for you to declare your assets upon assumption of office. And to be honest with you, I'm a bit surprised that, when the act was done, it didn't quite sit well with the tenets of the Constitution, because in many cases that Parliament has passed acts, almost all of those acts would have had to conform to the language and letter of the Constitution. And you don't see that in the act, which is a bit surprising to me. And I'm hoping that some amendments could be made, not just to the Constitution, but to the act, to make sure that we are engendering public trust. Because frankly, there's collapse of trust in public office holders. And all of us ought to have that at the back of our minds and realize that if we don't do something different, something anew, something radical, we may not even have this thing called a republic, God forbid, and we would have to practicalize things to engender trust in the public about politics and public office.
The Ghana Integrity Initiative has always been championing this, and they've raised some concerns about the process as well. Mary Ada is with us. And Mary, you've been listening to the former Auditor General, and Ras raised the point about possibly some reforms. And what's striking is the aspect about not focusing too much on the civil service or public servants. We've not been paying attention to them too much.
Oh, is that so? If you look, good evening to you and to your viewers, and also good evening to the former Auditor General and also MP. I wanted to add on that when it comes to the fight against corruption, and particularly around asset declaration, how does it practicalize it? I wanted to add, before coming to your question, that it helps in preventing corruption. Through prevention of illicit and risk. Because you would have declared your assets, but you could then base them for people who illicit and risk have become very difficult. And that's just so that people declare their assets.
Mary, we are having some challenges hearing you. If you could just take that point for us again.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, yes.
Great. So there is this assertion that people declare their assets, they put in a sealed envelope, and then they take it to the Auditor General. It's kept until there is an issue. I believe that is not wholly true, because we have worked with the Auditor General in the past, and we are aware that when they send this, there is some sort of case audit to that they are filled is what they say it is, and also they verify their signatures and the rest. I believe the former auditor mentioned it. Again, it helps us to also monitor as citizens, to monitor. I am with you in the community. I see that all of a sudden you are increasing in your status and wealth. When I know perhaps you are a journalist or you are a teacher just like me, or you are a civil society activist who didn't have much, it gives that monitoring role to the citizen to be able to then document and say, yes, these are suspicious characters and we need to report them as per the Constitution and also per Act 550 of 1998. Again, when we declare assets, it also promotes transparency and accountability of the public office holder. You need to be very transparent, propel sunlight into your life, And remember, it's not just about the assets being declared. You are also required its assets and liability declaration. So you are also declaring your liabilities. And the people around you can be able to tell. Then if you are acquiring assets which are not supposed to be, then the issues around auditing would come in, and we can also then report. It aids and facilitates reporting. What reforms do we need, as you ask? I remember in 1992, we had a certain law, the PNDC law 280 or so, if I'm correct. It spells out clearly the issues we were supposed to be declaring assets and liabilities on. And they included you declaring, apart from just declaring,
Yes, that's what happens sometimes when you're dealing with technology. We'll get back to Mary because she's raising some key points about reforms and the way forward. But back to you, Mr. Daniel Yaw Domelevo, the point about the constitutionality or otherwise, or the laxity in the law in terms of the 6 months provision. We had Rance there talking about the fact that perhaps it was an oversight by the parliamentary team working on the act at the time when, of course, this was passed. But I also, can recount, of course, you talking about a letter that was written to you by the then Chief Justice. Explain to us, how we can find a good balance on this, because that's where I believe the president is drawing his directive from.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, I think it's a deliberate thing that our legislators and the executive, the cabinet did to run away from accountability, because the law that Mary Ada was referring to actually provided for sanctions.
Right, and there you have it. Sorry for interrupting, but there you have it. That's the letter I'm talking about, correct?
Exactly.
So yes, this is a letter that was written to you? Right.
Yes, I'm going to come to this letter. I am very much familiar with this letter.
Right.
It was written to Occupy Ghana.
Okay.
So the act that Mary Ada was talking about gave the Auditor General 2 weeks to publish the declarations made to the Auditor General. Now, when they were doing the Constitution, they removed that from it. Okay, fine. The Constitution says that before coming to office. Now, when they were passing the law, they now say that when coming to office, before taking office, but not later than 6 months after, which is not in the Constitution. And in 2019, December, Occupy Ghana wrote to the Attorney General. Attorney General in 2020, I think January 2020, wrote back acknowledging the fact that he agrees, it was Gloria Kufu. She agrees that at 550 was in conflict with the provisions of the Constitution. Since 2020, up to today, they have not done the amendment because it doesn't suit the political class. It is not in their interest, so they have refused. Apart from that, the Conduct of Public Office Holders Bill has also been on the table for all these years. Part of its aim is to address this inconsistency with the Constitution. It has also been on the table throughout. In fact, it was there before I assumed office in 2017 when President Akufo-Addo came. It has already been there. I saw a version which was earlier than that. They revised it, I think, in 2020 or 2021. It has been, in fact, even the president promised passing it into law before leaving office. He will not. So the politicians are just paying lip services to this declaration because the issue is very clear. I'm sure they cannot justify the resources or the accumulation of wealth during their term of office. And for that matter, they pay lip service and get away with it. I hope that President Mahama lives with his promise that during the, constitutional review, we should put that in. If that is the case, then you should go back and comply with the Constitution, which already said they should declare before taking office. I am of the view that when he appoints or nominates a minister, and the minister finishes going through the vetting and approve, immediately you should ask the minister to go and declare his assets or she should go and
Okay.
declare the assets and liabilities.
Right. What I
before
intend to
we swear him
do,
or her in.
right. What I intend to do is also to take your thoughts on what the President Auditor General has also been recommending, the power for the Auditor General to also look into what's in the document. But before we get there, speak to this letter for me, because you say this was written to Occupy Ghana, but it gives a sense of how inconsistent perhaps the Act 550 you're referring to is with the Constitution.
Yes, this letter was written because Occupy Ghana was of the view that Act 550 was unconstitutional. The section which allows public office holders, including politicians and public office holders, public servants, to declare within 6 months after coming into office, or 6 months even after leaving office. They thought that provision was contrary to the provisions of the Constitution. So they wrote to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General wrote this letter confirming that she agrees that it was Act 550 was not in conformity with the constitutional provision. And I'm drawing your attention that this was as far back as what, 2020, and up to today, just a single line to Parliament to say we have amended 550. It has never happened. And I'm also drawing your attention to the fact that the conduct of Public Office Holders Bill, which will have addressed that inconsistency, has also been on the table long before 2027. I don't know when it was first drafted, but when I assumed office in 2016, it was already there, and it has still been there. President Akufo-Addo said he was going to pass, it didn't pass. So it is a deliberate tactic that the politicians and public office holders have been playing with us. They don't want to pass it. In fact, you don't know the number of arguments we have had on this issue outside the TV and radio. And they will tell you that, what are you talking about? You want people to kill us? They will you want my constituents to know that I have 20 million in my bank account. They will kill me. if I went to funeral and donated 100 Ghana, they will say that
you'll be exposed.
You have 20 million in your accounts, and these are the issues. They can't explain the wealth that they have accumulated over the period.
Yeah, but now, if we're giving the power to someone and not necessarily the Auditor General, who should we give the power to have that ability to perhaps open and verify it if we're not publicly putting the details out?
Well, as far as Ghana is concerned, there is nothing we can do because Article 286 is an entrenched clause. So you cannot even amend the Constitution unless you go through that full process of amending entrenched clauses, which is not an easy thing. The Auditor General can easily verify. The verification I'm talking about is not the one you did with the President, looking at whether he signed or he didn't sign. That's not the one. Comparing what is written on the paper to what is on the ground. That is, if you say you have a house, Auditor General may have to go and verify if you actually have a house, to avoid the situation where people do what I call anticipatory declaration. If you know you have stolen money somewhere and you can build a five-story house, a five-story building, you will have declared that you have it, and then you build it later on when they ask you to go and look at my asset declaration when I assumed office. So that verification at least is very important. The next one is the publication, whereby people in the community who know your assets can confirm that all your assets are in there or they are not there. And of course, your creditors will also confirm and look at it and say, hey, the guy borrowed so much, so the liabilities have been understated. So all that are very necessary. But the most important thing is that we must bring back punishment or consequences for not complying with it. And I'm happy the President has said that if you don't comply by this date, you lose your job. I think it is fantastic.
Okay, Ras Mubarak, the point about, consensus amongst the political class, are you sure that, and you've been interacting with your colleagues, are you sure that there's enough momentum, huge support from the political class to say, if we ever get to the point where we have to openly declare our assets, then we have to do so? Do you think your colleagues will be open to that idea?
Well, I think if there's enough push by the public, politicians are such that sometimes you need to force them to do the right thing. If the public is outraged enough about the sort of excesses that are happening or that have happened in our country, I think we would get there. You saw how the public was outraged and the way they voted in the 2024 elections. That is the attitude with which we want to see the public, because the issue of running a country is not only the exclusive preserve of people who hold high office. But there's another point I want to make, Blessed, that we should be careful we don't fantasize too much about asset declaration. Asset declaration, exciting, it is good, it is part of the processes of curbing corruption, but does that really curb corruption, assuming everyone complied and everybody declared their assets? No. We have had instances where people put up, property in their children's name, in their wife's name, who are not public officers. Are you going to say we need to go and audit those people as well? These are just legitimate questions. So I'm saying, even if you were to force it and get people declare their assets, you would have instances where people would hide the assets in the names of their mothers or their fathers or their friends. And my uncle, Idris Afuseni, has a very exciting terminology for this. He says, people also, he has a term, he says, declaration in anticipation of acquisition. There are instances also when people would say, I have X amount of buildings, and then when they take public office, then they walk their way backward. These are all things that are possible to happen. I don't have evidence to that, but I'm just saying we ought to be extremely careful. We don't fantasize over asset declaration, because we might lose sight of how, or the length at which people would go to hide their assets. What do I want to see? Apart from open declaration, I want to see a law on unexplained wealth, where the state can say, Blessed, you work at Joy, you drive a Maybach, where did you get that from? Where anybody who knows you, resident in your area, can actually report to the police or, whichever officer is given the authority on unexplained wealth to say, Ras Mubarak, you are a member of parliament, you've left parliament 8 years ago, this is what you do, you're a farmer. All of a sudden, you've got a mansion in Trasaco. How did you come by that? If you give the public enough power, I'm sure politicians would be very scared of, illegally or unlawfully plundering, state resources. And so, as much as we should encourage people to declare their assets in conformity with the law, but we must also have laws like unexplained wealth, where journalists like yourself or the public can say, look, I know this man, he was a teacher, all of a sudden he's been made a minister, and he's putting up a building. That certainly does not add up. The UK has done it, over the last few years. They've got laws on unexplained wealth. Other countries are following suit. We've got to, take cue from good governance. As much as we may want to pat our back for doing the right thing over the years. If you look at Africa, Ghana is one of the leading countries that has had laws on asset declaration. We may have been at the forefront, but 30-something years down the line, what are the lapses? What are the gaps? How do we overcome instances where people can use crafty ways of hiding their assets and wealth?
Okay, anyway, you would want to try me on the Maybach. Maybe I'll accept it and explain later. But anyway, Mary is also with us. Mary, we lost you earlier when you were making the point about some critical reforms that ought to happen. Briefly on that, and then the way forward. Mary Ada, are you still with us? Okay. Well, we seem to be having, challenges with her line today. But Mary Ada, if you can hear me, the question about, losing you earlier and the point you were making about the reforms and the way forward. Okay, we lost it, unfortunately. And so let's wrap up then by looking at beyond the asset declaration, the point about the piece of legislation that has been on the table for quite some time now. The Code of Conduct for Public Officers. that has been a long push by civil society. Mr. Dobelevu, your take, first of all, on that bill and why we've not passed it over the years?
My take on that bill is that it doesn't make public politicians and public officers comfortable. So they have been paying lip service to it. In fact, if you remember, President Nana Akufo-Addo said he was going to give us an international standard of asset declaration law. And he was going to review that bill to ensure it meets international standard. What he meant by international standard was that he was going to do nothing, and he did nothing and left office. I expect that President Mahama should do something quickly. But like my friend Ras Mubarak just said, asset declaration alone is not enough. We must complement it with lifestyle audit, unexplained wealth. And if we don't do that, it means people are going to hide their assets. If you look at the PNDC law 1992, you will see that even that law talks about your dependents, like wife, children, etc. They will all have to declare. But people can go beyond their family and hide it with their trusted friends, and that will also be so. The lifestyle audit is very important. We are in a country where you see someone who doesn't seem to have even any job, and he's making it big. Not that he's just subsisting, but he's making it big. We should be able to ask questions and find out, is the person making it genuinely, and is he paying tax on it? If you're not able to explain that you made it genuinely, then it must be taken away from you. In fact, Ethiopia has just shown the way. Ethiopia has passed the law, backdating it 10 years. Somebody went to the court to say that their constitution does not allow retroactive effect of laws. And the court ruled that corruption is in a class of its own. If you want to treat corruption like any other crime, the country will not go for progress. So they allow that as for corruption, they can go retroactively. Whereas even the constitution, just like ours, does not allow going backwards. So we must learn from good practice and do it, and I think it will help all of us.
Why are you speaking less of the civil service? You seem to have so much confidence in them.
I don't. I'm talking about public office holders. When I say public office holders, I'm talking about, okay, people don't seem to get the expression. I'm talking about politicians, right. I'm talking about civil servants, teachers, directors of what. In fact, the Act 550 provides that apart from the ministers, the politicians, etc., all chief directors, chief executives, heads of MMDAs, etc., up to the level of a director in the civil service, they should all declare their assets. And for other public service institutions, if your rank is up to, if not your rank, your salary is up to that of a director in the civil service, you are supposed to pay. Please permit me to explain that people don't get the difference between civil service and public service. Public service is the universal set. So if you look at Article 90 of the Constitution, it provides that the public service of Ghana is made up of the civil service, the judicial service, audit service, prison service, fire service, police service, immigration service, etc. So they are all required to declare their assets and liabilities as long as their salaries are equal to or higher than that of a director in the civil service. So it is not only politicians. I keep using the word public office holders. When I say public office holders, I mean both politicians and public servants.
Yeah. Interesting revelation there. But Mary is back with us before I hear from Ras. Mary, let's hear from you briefly, and then you to Ras, then we can wrap up.
I believe Honorable and then the former Auditor General have spoken extensively on this. And we have done a lot of work, and I can say that the Conduct of Public Officers Bill, which we all want to see passed, which started in 2013, as Mr. Dobelevu said, it was started before he came. And each government has ensured that they go through the life cycle of the parliament without passing it. In 2016, in fact, it got a read in parliament after the clause-by-clause analysis. Then in 2020, it didn't get to parliament. But then it was part of the IMF conditionality. And I am hoping that this government will take that bill again, because it provides for all the elements we want to in a asset and liability declaration regime. It provides for us to be able to see the asset declared and then give us the opportunity to monitor. So any asset declaration must come with the elements of sunshine, that is compliance also. It must come with accountability elements with it. So all the best practices that we are talking about from across the world should feature in an asset and liability declaration regime. If it comes with also sanctions,
right,
then we would be able to say that yes, if people are complicit, they would answer, like the president has indicated.
Okay.
He has the ultimate power to appoint and disappoint. And so we are hoping that as he has done, even though it's not consistent with the Constitution, he was supposed to have declared his assets before he took office, and I continue to stand by what the Constitution has said. But it's not too late. It's good that he has done it. And for me, the critical thing is the call he has made, that he's not going to countenance any lack of compliance from his
I see. Right. Final few seconds to you, Ras, as we wrap up.
We need to enforce compliance of existing legislation. There are too many laws in the statutes, that help us fight corruption. But we also have to ask ourselves, why is corruption so pervasive that in spite of the laws, people are still acting in a manner that does not reflect who we ought to be? And for me, we have to go back to basics. Start from the school system, teaching young kids on ethics, integrity, patriotism, so that we imbibe these values, these time-tested values in them. Until we are able to do these things, we may pass laws, but every now and then we'll have people, slipping in and acting in a manner that does not reflect who we ought to be as a country. Okay,
we see what then happens by March 31st, but grateful to you, gentlemen, Ras Mubarak, former MP for Kumbungu, and also to you, Daniel Yao Domelevo, former Auditor General, and Mary Ada, Executive Director for the Ghana Integrity Initiative. There's with PM Express wrapping up tonight. We'll see you again, same time tomorrow. Bye.